right, so we are going to get going. I'm just going to record this presentation so that the people in the classroom, when they jump in or whatever, they can get what they missed. So we just have a few slides we got to go over that we didn't get to last week. So there's like 4 slides. First, the reason why I am not in school this morning, I woke up and I had a cough and a sore throat. So I'm going to make sure I get tested. I don't want to go to school and start a whole other everyone out all the time. So I'm just playing it safe. I also almost took my finger off yesterday on a table saw. So that is in a lot of pain that I need to get taken care of. So it was kind of I'm just going to stay home and play it safe today. So that's where we're at. So what we're going to start with, you guys can all see the slideshow I'm presenting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So at the end, we're just going to do a quick review of Hardy-Weinberg.
Of that township water. Gotcha. Twin Lakes temporary drawdown of what they've done.
Dad's just about to pass Flying J. He's getting off of the highway right now. Not that I'm
You want to put yourself on mute, please? If you have a question. Thank you. So we have a couple slides we need to finish up from last Tuesday when we got caught up on Hardy-Weinberg math. So kind of review of natural selection. When we have natural selection, the main idea, the main thing that drives it is all about the fitness of the organism. So the fitness is the ability of an organism to actually live long enough to reproduce. And the more times they can reproduce, the greater their fitness is. So if an organism or an individual were to have 1 offspring, they would have a lower fitness than somebody that might, say, have like 10 offspring because they reproduced more. They passed on their genetics at a higher rate, which means that down the line, their genetics will be more greatly represented in the population than that of an individual that only had 1 offspring, or if they had no offspring, then they would have no representation whatsoever. So one of the big kind of mistakes that kind of get brought up is this phrase survival of the fittest, where the fittest individual will survive. The biggest, burliest, strongest, smartest, fastest individual, because they are more fit than somebody else or they're more fit than another organism, automatically means that they're going to survive and reproduce. And that just isn't the case, at least not all the time. In a perfect world, that would be the case, but it's not a perfect world. There are situations that are caused by what we call acts of God, like fires or earthquakes or tornadoes, things that are completely out of control that an ecosystem doesn't plan for, and people don't plan for, and life doesn't plan for. So where we could easily have a bunch of completely fit organisms surviving, and they get wiped out by a fire. And now all of those fit organisms don't survive. They don't reproduce. So their genetics are wiped out. So we don't usually talk about in ecology survival of the fittest because it's just not true. You could maybe say survival of the fitness, and it'd be more true. But usually we just don't talk about that because of the fact that things happen. There's a lot of luck involved with surviving. It's not, case in point, nearly chopping your finger off. Accidents happen. Things happen. So to kind of go with the trend or the focus of last week, we were talking about natural selection, this idea of fitness, and then more importantly, the idea of population genetics that are caused by like this Hardy-Weinberg, these dominant and recessive alleles in a population. We can talk about a couple types of specific natural selection that we can see in different populations. So one of the more common ones are stabilizing selection, which means that genetics, genotypes are prone or more likely to become the average. So if there was a lot of individuals in a population that were really tall and a lot of individuals in a population that were really short, if they were going through a stabilizing selection over time, you would see a population somewhere in the middle that isn't super tall or super short. We specifically see this in human populations when it comes to birth and babies. Thank God you don't usually see a baby that weighs 30 pounds. You don't usually see a newborn baby that is less than 2 pounds because there's a stabilizing selection that has occurred. Because in general, babies that are less than 6 pounds have a higher mortality rate. So you see fewer of those babies because of infant mortality. And because of that, those babies that are genetically inclined to produce offspring themselves that are of lighter weights don't reach maturity so that they can reproduce, and those genetics are kind of pushed out. We see the exact same thing when we start to increase above an 8-pound baby. If you tend to be 9, 10 or more pounds, your mother typically can't naturally give birth to you. You have to go through a cesarean section or a C-section to actually be born. And there's a significant number of mortality that, or an increased level of mortality that can occur because of that. So because of this fitness or this stabilizing selection that's caused by natural selection, we over time have seen babies that typically exist between 6 and 8 pounds, and not too many that exist outside of that range. With modern medicine, we are seeing more and more babies born that are closer to 4 pounds or closer to 11 pounds. But those extreme phenotypes in general, those extreme baby weights, are selected against because of this idea. Here is, as far as I'm aware, the largest baby ever born that's recorded. I'm pretty sure they were like 22 or 26 pounds. This is not supported by stabilizing selection for obvious reasons. Giving birth to a baby at this size is just not feasible naturally, and there's a high level of mortality that can rise when you give birth to a chunky baby like this. We also see a directional selection. So with stabilizing selection, we're looking at the average. With directional selection, we are focusing more on those extremes. Those extreme phenotypes, those extreme characteristics are supported in a population. And we can see that in the example of a whale evolution. We see that in the example of bird evolution, going from dinosaurs to birds, where that extreme phenotype is selected for. They have a higher fitness. When we think about the idea of the polar bear, the whiteness of the fur with a polar bear was an extreme. It was a mutation that occurred that led to an individual or individuals that have a higher fitness by accident or by luck, by extremes. And it just so happened that that individual has a higher fitness because they can blend in with the background. With whales were once land mammals that looked very similar to wolves or something like a wolf. And we can see over millions and millions of years, those extremes just kept getting selected for. And that's what led to an animal the size of a wolf becoming the largest animal on the planet, or the largest known animal ever to live. So if we look at this quick simulation, here we have a small land mammal, not much bigger than a wolf, not super huge, takes to the water, and over time, there are these extremes. A mutation occurred that led to webbed feet. A mutation occurred that led to a flat tail. And over time, you see those hind limbs decreasing in size. Those are all mutations that are extremes that have occurred. Selections that have occurred that lead to a more fish-like organism evolving. And as we go, we see organisms that have that tail become more dramatic, more focused on being an idea or a thing to propel that organism forward. Here with Deuterodon, we've almost completely eliminated the hind limbs altogether. There's nothing but vestigial appendages, or you can see that's those small little legs there that are completely useless. They're just remnants of what was. So with directional, we're moving towards a specific trait or this specific form through these extreme characteristics that can occur. Let's see. I want to go on. There we go. So here we have the last kind of selection that we really focus on. So we have the average, we have the extreme, and now we have kind of the disruptive selection, or the move that the average type or phenotype is selected against over time. So if we think specifically about rabbits or hares, there are particular parts of the year in Wisconsin or Minnesota where specific phenotypes are selected for and specific phenotypes are selected against. If we're in the dead of winter and there's a bunch of snow on the ground, the average or the white hare rabbit or the white hare is going to be selected for because they can blend in very easily. But the rest of the year, or the vast majority of the year, we see a selection against white rabbits, where we get a population of rabbits that either have darker fur tones or a mixture of white and dark, which allows them to blend into their ecosystem super well. So over time, these mutations that have led to different fur colors lead to the separation of the species into two distinct phenotypes and the removal of those white hair traits that led to easy predation by foxes, wolves, birds of prey, whatever it is, because a white object in a brown background sticks out like a sore thumb. We can also see this in a population of birds down by the Ecuador or the equator. These specific ones kind of focus around the Galapagos Islands. And I know you're going to laugh, ha, ha, ha. These birds are called boobies. Some boobies have red feet, some have blue feet, and this is all because of this idea of disruptive selection, where in this case, not nature, but a mate selection led to individuals with certain traits. So over time, the females of the population had mate selection. Those males with blue feet were more selected or had a greater fitness. They produce more offspring. You see a trend to diverge away from this individual population where these birds probably had an orange colored feet. We see the opposite where they went from orange to red. So in this particular population, red feet were selected for and orange feet selected against. And you see over time, these two populations diverge and separate. So that's kind of all I have notes-wise. The last thing before you head out that I'd like you to do, I added another understanding check for Hardy-Weinberg. So I have this situation. I have 65% of the St. Croix County population is homozygous dominant for carrying the tall gene, so height. People that have tall height have a dominant trait. So I want you to do this understanding check. So you that are at home, if you have a scrap piece of paper lying around, I'd like you to answer these 3 questions for me using our 2 equations. If you want, you can make a Google Doc where you step-by-step walk through this and share that Google Doc with me. But when I return, hopefully Wednesday, maybe Thursday, it depends on what happens, I will check for this completion to make sure you've got this idea, so that when we move on to our test, I know that this isn't going to be a problem area. So go through this. Remember, 65% represents the p squared value. So p squared is equal to 0.65. So from there, you have to figure out the p value in number 1. What percentage of people equal p that carry that dominant allele, whether that is heterozygous, meaning they have both a dominant and recessive, or homozygous, meaning that they have both dominants. So in number 2, you're going to need to figure out the percentage of people that are homozygous recessive, meaning they only carry 2 recessive alleles for height. So you want to find the Q squared value in number 2. And then in number 3, you want to figure out the average or the heterozygous individuals that are heterozygous for height, meaning they carry a dominant and a recessive trait for height. So you need to figure out what 2 times P times Q is based on your other calculations. So make sure that you practice this. When I return, I get this slip of paper so that I know that I can check it over and make sure that you've got the idea. If there are any questions, just let me know. I think we only have a few minutes of class left. So this recording will go up on Classrooms for the actual class. I don't think they were able to join in. So that'll be available to you and for them. I will end my presentation and my recording here. So you can kind of jump off whenever you're ready. If you have any questions, I'll still be in here for the remainder of class. But you guys, your attendance is taken. You don't have to worry about that. I will make sure that you guys are counted as present.